Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
Positronic Hypersonic.
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the series premiere of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, which just happened on Disney Plus today. It was a 2-episode premiere, and the first episode was called Amazing Fantasy. As it starts, Peter Parker wakes up late for school and misses the train, but ends up getting a ride from Aunt May, who has an Iron Man doodad hanging from her rearview mirror. Just as he arrives at school, a weird portal opens up right over the school, and a spidery-looking bipedal creature falls out of it and almost attacks some people before it's temporarily held back by Doctor Strange, who also emerges from the portal. But it gets away from Doctor Strange, and he has to try to contain it again before it hurts a bunch of people. When it grabs one girl, named Nico, Peter approaches it and throws a brick at it to get its attention away from her, only to almost be attacked himself, but Doctor Strange manages to grab it and pull it back through the portal, while a tiny spider that also came through the portal bites Peter on the back of his neck, causing him to pass out. Fast forward to a few months later, Peter once again wakes up late and once again misses the train, but this time swings his way there as Spider-Man, and seems to use some sort of hydraulic system in his backpack in order to supply himself with web fluid. He ends up having to take a detour on his way to school to save Harry Osborn from a few bullies before formally introducing himself to Harry as your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Later he runs into Pearl, an older fellow student whom apparently he has a crush on, and Nico encourages him to tell her that he likes her. Later in class, Peter hears a police chase going on and excuses himself from class to use the boys' room, only to, of course, go chasing after the bad guys that the police were chasing. He ends up stopping the van that the bad guys were in just before it crashes into a bus by positioning himself between the bus and the van and essentially catching it, at which point a crowd gathers, as do a whole bunch of police. Then, back in his regular clothes, he goes to try to ask out Pearl, but he's stopped by Nico, who lets him know that someone has beaten him to it. Later, he ends up unintentionally becoming the lab partner of Pearl's new boyfriend. Apparently, Pearl talked Peter up big time to her boyfriend, which encouraged him to want to partner with Peter because he too has an interest in science. On his way home, the boyfriend, named Lonnie, encounters a bit of racial profiling. Later, as Spider-Man, Peter returns some money to a neighborhood shopkeep who'd had it stolen on him by a woman who's down on her luck, and convinces the shopkeep to not press charges. He then gets home to find that Norman Osborn has come to pay him a visit, and that's where the episode ended. The second episode was called The Parker Luck. As it begins, Norman Osborn tells Peter he discovered his excellent science aptitude when scanning available academic records and offers him an internship, which Peter gleefully accepts. Peter then apprehends a would-be burglar and leaves him for the cops before arriving at school and being introduced by Lonnie to other members of the football team who take a liking to him. He later briefly visits the team at their game with Nico to find that Nico is suspicious of Norman before heading off to his internship, where he meets his fellow interns, one of whom is from Wakanda, as well as the intern leader, Dr. Whitman, who tests them on their abilities to see where to place them. And Peter gets placed with a female Dr. Connors, aka Lizard, who says they'll be working on a power source similar to the arc reactor. Later, he goes to a building fire to apprehend the arsonist who's been paid to burn down buildings so that his benefactor can acquire the land for a huge high-rise project. Peter is then called to see Mr. Osborn, and it turns out that Mr. Osborn saw him change into his Spider-Man costume inside the Oscorp building on the security cameras and knows his secret. And that's where the second episode ended. So, since the trailer for this show came out, I've seen a lot of people saying that they didn't think it was going to be good, that the animation rubbed them the wrong way, that they didn't like how characters have been race and gender swapped. But I found it to be pretty good. I actually like the animation. I think the animation is very reminiscent of comic books and comic strips, which of course is the whole origin of Spider-Man as well as other superheroes. So I like that aspect of it. I think the person they got to do Peter Parker Spider-Man does a great job in the voice. I think the writing captures the essence of Spider-Man, what Spider-Man is supposed to be, like a goofy kid who goes around solving crimes with a very sort of Dudley Do-Right kind of methodology. They even paid homage to Spider-Man of old by incorporating the theme song from the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon into their theme song. So that's pretty cool. I don't have a problem with gender swapping and race swapping characters. I think race swapping is all but absolutely necessary in 2025 when media producers are making new versions of 60-year-old properties that were created back in very racist times and which didn't include people of color because of that racism. I think to make these properties today into new things, new iterations, and to use only white characters, first of all, would make it look unrealistic, right? I mean, especially in the case of a show that takes place in Queens or in New York City, where Peter's from Queens and it takes place in New York City and there's going to be only white people. Doesn't make any sense. Beyond that, I think it would be wrong to once again lock black actors or actors of color out of these parts in 2025 because they were locked out of them in 1965 due to racism. That would just be to re-victimize them all over again. And so many projects in Hollywood these days are these modern adaptations of 60-year-old properties that people of color would be locked out of every other production being produced if they did things that way, and that just wouldn't be right. So I don't have a problem with that. Gender swapping is a similar situation, right? Because again, women were portrayed quite differently 60 years ago when, properties like Spider-Man or even further back, if you're talking about Batman and Superman, were made. And so all the characters of consequence were male. And so the producers of this show had decided they're not going to do that. They gender swapped Dr. Connors. So I think it's fine. I think it makes things more realistic because women are in different positions in society now than they were back then. And it makes sense that some of them are going to be the one-armed scientist who turns himself into a lizard and whatnot. So I didn't have a problem with that. An interesting thing about this show is that Uncle Ben is barely mentioned. He's mentioned in one quick scene where Peter thanks May for taking care of him as well as she does as a single parental figure in the wake of Uncle Ben's death, but that's the only mention of him. Because, a big part of Spider-Man's inspiration to become a hero was what happened to Uncle Ben. And we don't see how Uncle Ben died. We don't see that Uncle Ben's death was a catalyst for Peter's becoming Spider-Man. I found it a little unusual that Peter automatically hits it off with the football team because, in the comics, one of Spider-Man's, or rather Peter's, biggest detractors is Flash Thompson. So that character doesn't exist on this show so far. I thought that was a kind of weird since they brought up the whole football team thing. And, he was on the football team in the comics. Also absent are Peter's traditional love interests, Gwen Stacy and MJ. They're both missing, and in their place is this Pearl person that Peter has a thing for. So that was kind of weird, but maybe, they'll show up later. Who knows? But I like these first two episodes. I think they are off to a good start with the show. Again, Peter and Spider-Man both come off exactly as you would want Peter and Spider-Man to come off. They've introduced some of the key players, Dr. Connors, Harry Osborn, and Norman Osborn, who of course becomes Green Goblin in the comics. I like the Nico character. I think she's cool. And as I said, I really like the animation style. So I think they're off to a good start. I think this is going to be a decent show. Nothing about it blew me away, but it's early, so that could still happen. For now, I'm definitely going to keep watching it, and I will definitely be doing review videos for the episodes as they're released. For now, I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.